let me start off probably at the deepest level, which is the level about, the fact is we now know that reality exists as patterns of energy, subatomic particles, all of that stuff. You can go and they don't actually exist as things in themselves. They're patterns of energy. And these patterns of energy create things such as atoms, and atoms create molecules, and the patterns of the molecules then create substances like iron and copper. And the pattern of those then create things like planets or whatever. And those out of all of those patterns then come DNA, and DNA creates living things and so on and so on. So everything in the universe is really about a pattern. Now, life forms are rooted in DNA, and what DNA does is it creates organisms that can survive for a short period of time, reproduce, and then that's that. So there's a lot of questions about what's the point of all that, but it's important because what we know in terms of the reproduction process, there are two strategies that evolution has used, and what they're called K and R. Now, in R strategies, basically reproduction occurs because you create hundreds, if not thousands, of offspring. Okay,
Mm.
so the little turtles, for example, a mummy turtle plants them in the sand and then disappears off into the sea, and they have to survive for themselves. And a very small percentage of them survive. Most of them eaten or die of starvation or something. So it's pretty terrifying that. Now, what happened with what is called R selection is that environments became more predictable, and there began to be a process whereby rather than leaving the infants, the parents started to guard the infants, guard their hatchlings. So, for example, crocodiles will pick up their hatchlings and carry them, pick them up in the mouth and carry them to the water. So that was the beginning of caring for your genetic reproduced offspring. That became so successful in the ways in which DNA recreates itself that the caring of others, of providing for them, supporting them, protecting them became big time. And so over the next hundreds of millions of years, species were beginning to show increasing caring behavior. So birds obviously care for their young and they feed them, they're going to get the food and everything, and protect them from predators. Most mammals do the same. So this process of caring for your infant was profound. And not only was it profound, but in order to do that, you needed to build brains that could do that. You needed to build brains that could recognize another being, in this case, your infant. You could recognize their needs. You could recognize what it is you need to do in order to support them. So if your offspring is needing to be rescued, you would rescue them. If they were needing thermal regulation then you would do that. If they needed to be fed, you would do that. So that's a phenomenally important process that just exploded over millions of years, or in multiple species, and multiple species evolved precisely because of the evolution of caring behavior. So we can certainly plot caring behavior through the care of offspring, and then when they become able to survive without the support of the parent, off they go. No, that's really fundamental. And a lot of the physiological systems, such as oxytocin, endorphins, all these systems, which were fundamental. So oxytocin evolved with the caring system. That's where it evolved. It didn't exist before that, as far as I know. It has become absolutely fundamental to how our brains are. Now, once you get the idea that caring behavior then has this profoundly important impact. Now, there's a number of things about caring behavior, which is very interesting. One is a problem with caring behavior. That is, caring is only directed to your own offspring. You don't just care for any old offspring. And the other point, however, is that it can make you very internally orientated. Okay. So, and we'll talk about that a little later on. So, okay, that's great. So we got this. But then what happened was evolution tends to utilize systems that work and put them to new uses.
Hmm.
So those capacities for caring and taking an interest in others gradually evolved into processes of forming alliances, forming friendships, and so on and so on. Now, that's quite a complicated story, so I won't go into that too much. But basically, what happened in the case of humans, and this is important, I think, is that we evolved out of a primate species, probably separated from chimpanzees maybe 6 million years ago, something like that. Now, chimpanzees, bonobos are a little bit different, but chimpanzees are primarily a hierarchical species where it's what we call control and hold. So, you get access to resources and power by being more aggressive or more threatening, and the subordinates kind of, keep out of your way, basically. So you have a hierarchy of power, power hierarchy within the line. Now, what happened for humans is that the subordinates began to gang up against dominance and share resources. They started to support each other. So if a dominant picked on a subordinate, subordinates' allies would come around and protect it. So that's quite extraordinary. And they were starting to utilize those systems of caring and protection that had developed within the parental. So it started to get recruited into this way of actually helping each other deal with these threats within the hierarchy. And they moved to what is called a care and share. And care and share became one of the most fundamental changes in the evolution of humanity. Now, if you're interested in this, anybody's listening to this, go and look it up on the internet. It's called The Domestication of Humans, Human Domestication. And there's a wonderful book by Hare called The Evolution of Friendship. Fantastic book. So humans became very orientated, not for control and hold, but for caring and sharing, were taking an interest in each other and providing for each other and protecting each other. And our status and sense of value became associated with the desire to be of value. Okay. Now, as far as we know, chimpanzees don't wonder about wanting to be of value. Do you need me? Is there anything I can do for you? I mean, they don't, as far as we know, do that. But humans are phenomenally interested in being of value. If you go on the internet, you'll find that there's just about, you can just learn just about anything of how to paint, how to build cars, how to build your house, how to do gardens, how to make fairy cakes. Why? People aren't making any money. They just want to tell you. They just want to share with you. I want to show you how to do this. I want to show you how you can do that. The ability to share and care is phenomenally important to humans. And when we feel we have something to share, we feel of value, we feel of use to other people, this is great. It's very good for us and it's very good for our bodies. So that's all to the good. The slight problem with it is, however, is that the control and hold psychology is still there. So you can stimulate that by then threatening individuals and telling them they need more. And, this group over there is going to take away from you or hurt you. And you've got to be, me first, my country first, my group first. And I don't care about anybody else. So you can stimulate the more aggressive desire. No, this is mine. No, I'm going to hold on to it. No, I want control. And I want more than you. You can stimulate those psychologies because you can now do that. Now, in hunter-gatherer groups, you couldn't do that because there's only 150 of you. And if anyone tried to do that, they got booted out, basically. But in modern societies, which are surrounded by hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people, it's very easy for dominant males, usually, not always, to get this control and hold psychology going again. So this is extremely important that when we begin to recognize that at the root of the human evolution was care and share. However, it evolved in small groups where we knew each other. Care and share psychology doesn't always translate that well across groups into strangers. And you've also got a number of individuals who are very interested in control and hold, and they can be quite a problem. So compassion, really, the desire to be of help to other people, the desire to address their suffering, the desire to protect them, to look after them, to make sure they flourish, all of that, which is part of caring behavior, that is fundamentally human. But one of the things that we do is to look at what inhibits it. Why are we not like that all the time? Well, because it's very easy for us not to be.
Mm.
So that's the work we do of trying to help people realize that your natural way of being is to be compassionate.
That that's fascinating, Paul. You've really thought this through from the ground up. So do you think, because our psychology, that caring psychology evolved in the context of those small groups of max 150 people, as agriculture developed, as societies got bigger and bigger, do you think things like religions were attempts at sort of tapping into that psychology at a larger scale and sort of expressing that in a way that might help larger groups to get on better and stay away from the command control side of things?
I think it's a wonderful point because religions usually are associated with a threat, right? So if you look at all the gods, there have been many, many societies that had lots of different types of guards, like the Greeks and the Romans. The idea of a single guard, not that many, a few, but not that many cultures had those. So guards really were there to protect you and you could call on them. And so if you were a group who had to go to sea in shark-infested waters and, to catch fish, then you had guards of the sea, and you sacrificed to them and you prayed to them so they would protect you. No, there are no guards of the sea in the Himalayas, as far as we know. There are different types of guards. So what we know is that religions and gods, all these things, all the variations and creations were created because we needed to create a sense that there are more powerful others that could help us back into that attachment. Is there a sort of someone that will protect us and help us and provide for us? That attachment system, which is what the mother does for the parents do with the child, that is now created into projected up into a religious form. So maybe there is a God in the sky that will protect us. Maybe there's a God in the sky that will provide for us. Maybe there's a God in the sky that will come and rescue us, right? Sort of projection of the attachment system, mostly. It's a little bit more complicated. So absolutely. And the other thing that it did was to create a sense of cohesiveness with a group that was bigger than 150. So if I said I'm a Christian, then you immediately know the kind of belief systems I'm going to hold, and that I can identify with you, and so on and so on. The problem comes, however, that works okay, except that also there's an opportunity. Well, hang on a minute. What about if I have a different kind of God? I have a different, take a different psychedelic, and I see a different God. Well, maybe we should follow them because they're going to be better. My God is going to be more protective, more powerful than yours. My Messiah is better than yours, right? So you get into this competitive situation again, and then we've got the good old tribal wars, and people will, sacrifice themselves in the thousands, if not millions, in order to prove themselves worthy of God's love and protection. It's a disaster for humanity, but it's all being rooted in the old archetypal processes, right? That's what it's all rooted in. And so religions, yes, they had a cohesiveness. They were generated as a way of solving problems. They were generated as a way of helping us to think there are people that could, gods or beings that could look after us, and so on and so on. So they had these real psychological functions. But in many ways, they've been a problem. Now, there has been some religions that have always tried to move spirituality towards care and share, and away from control and hold, away from power, away from this is, jihads and all that. Um, Trying to move us into, we're all one, we're all part of the same. We need to care and share. The concept of, in many religions, is basically sacrifice for the other. So those archetypal processes in some aspects of religions can be very powerful, but they also have a terrible, as you know, dark side, because they're all based on tribal, and they're also based on, my God is better than yours. Because if my God isn't better than yours, oh, maybe I should be with you then. But no, I can't be with you because then I will lose my group identity,
Mhm.
and so on and so on.